Why are we doing information system modeling? So models are essential for communications. As we have explained, systems are abstractions. It's very difficult to have everybody on the same page to understand what we're talking about, what we need, etc. So to do that, we're using model. We're using model to manage the complexity because systems are complex. There's many layers, we've said, and we need everyone to understand all the dimension of the systems, technical, infrastructure, functionality, process involved, peoples involved, where everyone fits in the whole picture. So that's why we use model. This enables our brain to understand and also to have everybody on the same page. Information system, business model. So this is the first kind of model we can do. The what we call business model is like it's a loose representation of the organization. It enables to present the objective, the mission of the organizations, and also the main function inside the organization, how everything is working together. In terms of terminology, we're using two type of model that looks like similar but not similar. We have the business model, which is an overview. This is what we have just talked about. The business model is to bring you a overview and integration of the objectives, the missions, and the role of all the parts of the organization, how they contribute, how they bring value in regard of the social protection program they have to manage. And the other terms is business process. So the business process is really in regard of the administrative process that are occurring. Like it's like at the operating level. So we will see business process shortly. So the main goal of having a business process is to have a big picture view and to be able to communicate easily with the main stakeholder, the higher manager of the organization, and make sure that they understand where they are, and also from you as the one professional that have to deliver systems to make sure that you understand where you have to put in phases, and also to make sure that you see all the components that are involved in the organization, that are involved in your new system. So here is an example, a real example of a business model that has been used in Myanmar. This was for the Social Security Board in Myanmar. So the Social Security Board has the mission of providing essentially workers insurance for injury, and also they were providing healthcare. That wasn't their mission, so they have a medical functions. So they were providing money, they were providing pensions, and so that's what the diagram is showing. So the blue part, the up part of the diagram, you see the administrative function more, and most of the administrative department will have a specialized function, obviously, that will support the whole mission. The green part, then you're down to the operation part. So you see in color, essentially the process that are supported, like employer registration, employee inspections, preventions, um, registrations, compensation payment management, etc. We see that we have a a compensation funds that is managed by the security board, but it's managed partly by banks. So we see banks in the picture, and you have all the medical function. Here we have an explosion. We have more detail about the medical function. So they are operating hospital and they are operating field clinics, SSB clinics, Social Security Board clinics. So they have all their own functions and mission and objectives. So we can see that the medical function is quite extensive, and somewhat a little bit complex, but because there's a lot of pieces there. So the Social Security Board of Myanmar, they have a big challenge. They not only manage the worker compensation mechanism, but also managing the medical functions. Like they have hospitals and they have a lot of clinics to provide services to the workers. So that's what we can see in the business model there. This is another representation that we also name business model. So this is specifically to show all the links between the organization that support the system, that it's the source of the system, with the other organizations that are involved. So you will have in the situation of the social ministry, the Social Security Board, they are under the governance of the Ministry of Labor and Immigration, and they have links with other ministries and agency, with some of which they are exchanging information, like the Ministry of Health. And they also have other boards, like the Worker Compensation Court of Appeal. And inside the Social Security boards, you have all sort of governance entity, which are folding under the Social Security Board box. So this kind of model, business model, the idea is to provide you a way to understand the whole universe you're in and make sure that you understand it by challenging, by asking the higher management to validate with you this model, because this will talk to them. This is a language they will understand. It's not too much detail, and for you, it will bring you some clues about some places that you need to have more attention when you do the design of your system. Information system modeling, administrative process model. We have two layers of models. So this is a generic level, so a high level that illustrate the operational process. So it's a simple model. It resembles the business model, but it focuses on the administrative process. So that's a high level to illustrate some process that are occurring. So the idea again is to talk with the higher management and the main stakeholder in your project, and it enables you to discuss about streamlining. So you will use this kind of simple representation to identify some problems that you would have noticed by analyzing the statistics and analyzing the actual process. So we have just seen the high-level diagram technique, and but you will need to use a detailed diagram, which is based mainly on a formula is called swim lane. So we've just talked about the high-level model. So it's just you see just one straight process as simplify as possible and focusing on the main functions of a given process. So what you do is you just provide first level of explanation for each of the boxes. Each of the boxes is a part of the process, is a task, and you just identify what's happening and you're highlighting what's to be done and if there's a improvement to be done. And this is done again to talk with the higher hierarchy. In this case, is what's in the box is coming from INES in Mozambique, the social protection ministry there. That was like almost over 15 years ago. This was something that has been done there. Now we're talking about the a detailed diagram. So it may be this kind of diagram that will be more useful. It takes time to build. So we got the idea of the swim line. So the swim line is the horizontal lines. So swim lines, as the picture you've seen, relate to the fact that in a swimming competition, the competitors are swimming in lines and parallel ways. So that's why we say swim line. So the idea is that each line represent a department or a specific person that do a specific task. So each time, and you have the task, the boxes are the tasks that are executed by a person that's either in a department or a specific department. And so roughly here, that's an illustration based on what happened in what's happening in Myanmar, is still happening in Myanmar. It's still in use. So it's the description of the worker registration process. So you are in the Social Security Board. So you need to identify the worker that are in the process that are covered by the program. So the first thing that has been done is the registration. Can be done by the employer of the worker or by the employer itself. So we see here all the tasks that are involved in the registration of a worker. So you see that line are crossing multiple departments and multiple steps of registration and checking and so on. So that's what you do with administrative process. You identify the task, you identify the intervenant, the departments or the specific roles, who's doing what, in which sequence. And then you can see what's good and it becomes more obvious sometime. Not sometime, it's became obvious when you see this kind of diagram, what's working, what's not working. So as a result of having this kind of diagram, you can make some recommendation. So you see the grid. You can do recommendation in phase. Let's say you say like the most important one you need to do, that will be in phase one. In that case, they decided to have two phases. So the phase one, they decided to make some very important improvement. And second phase, there's some other. Functional model. So this is another kind of layer of a system, a layer of abstraction. What do you mean by functional model? So the functional model objectives, how to describe the application, describe the system part. So all in the business process model, we have the task of the person, essentially, the manual task. But here we want to describe what we need the system to do. So for each task of a person, most of the time there's a corresponding function in the system. So that's what we want to describe here. And then after, we will be able to understand where the data is, where the data comes from, what's happening to that data in the function. So we are usually having two kind of model that we can use. We have what we call the functional model itself, which is quite an old way of doing models. And we have the UML, use case model, which is a little bit more contemporary. Both models have advantage and disadvantage. Functional model may be more intuitive to work with. So let's explain a little bit about that. Information system modeling, functional model. So we have two type of formalists, two type of model we can use. We have the functional model itself, which is a quite an old type of modeling technique. It's over 50 years old. And we have the UML, use case model, which is more contemporary, 25 years old. Both have their strength and weakness. Maybe the functional model is a bit easier when you begin to use those kind of models. IT professional, we tend to use UML, but both are fine. So how does it work? Let's go in with an example. So here we have a real example of a system that has been built in Mozambique quite some time ago. So it was a pension system for elderly and poor people. So what we see here is the use of the functional model technique. So the first thing we do is like what we call a contextual model. So we have the frame. The name of the frame is level 0. That's the beneficiary management system. That's what's the name of the system. It's what we see there, the box inside this framework. So you see actually there's 5 boxes. So the one box that for the system management functions, another box for the beneficiary management process, another box for this subsidies payment management, another box for the finance management, and another box to generate statistics and a report for the management. Outside of the box, you see the white square. So those are the entities, external entities. So these are the either person, organization, or other system that are interacting with your system. So roughly, that's how we put the table there. Then we go function by function. So we have identified 5 functions. So they are subdivided, they are exploded into more details. Let's say sub-functions. Let's go to, this is for about the system management, but let's go to another bigger function. So that's for the beneficiary management. So again, we have 4 functions inside this bigger functions. And it covers the process of registrations and demand. So this is a demand process system. That means that the person that wants to benefit from the program needs to present a demand. So that's one of the input that's coming in the system. If you don't provide a demand, you will never receive subsidies. So you proceed with the demand. And the demand in this case was on paper base. And that was the start of the system. So you have a process where you upload the information of the forms of the demand into the system, entering manually into the system. And then the process is partly automated. So you have the register that is created, then there's a verification mechanism, and so on. So you have all those boxes that explain how the function inside the system, the computerized system, are working, but in a way that you, as a, let's say, user of the system, a person responsible for the system, not the developers, the social protection specialists, it's you that have to explain what you want the system to do. So that's what you do with a functional system. You don't try to make it like for the system to be coded with, to be programmed with. I mean, this will serve for the IT specialist to understand what you want the system to do. So this is kind of a requirement for the IT specialist. That way they will have a better understanding of what you want the system to do. That's why we have this kind of model. You may have like some more details written document that will support. Like for example, the subsidies payment management, we have a detailed explanation that is written down. So that's what you want to provide to the system developer. So this will specify what you want to check, what kind of verification you want to be made, the rules that will have to be applied to generate the payment. In this case, let's say the first of the month, you do the screening of all the eligible beneficiary that can receive this amount of payment, and you generate the cash payment through the process that will be defined later on, et cetera, et cetera. So that way, the IT developer have a detailed understanding of what you have to do, what the system have to do. And so that's conclude the functional model description. We have used the Mozambique system design that has been done about 15 years ago. Information system modeling, data model. That's another layer, another dimension of a system. We have talked about the function. Now we talk about the data. So we need to have a description of the data in a way that the system can store it and process it. So as a user of the system, we need to describe each element, what it means for us. And then after, again, the system developer are able to understand for each data what are the elements that are composing the data. So we have a way of doing a data model. So we use the what we call the entities, and inside the entities we have data element. So I will step right to an example. So again, this is I'm always with this Mozambique system, cash transfer system that has been built. So the data model is built with different levels. So this is the first level of the data model. So we have large group of data. So we have all the data concerning the social subsidies demand, and we have all the data that are about the financials, and we also have the data in this case for the access and control of that data. So let's go for a part of the model that concerns the subsidies demand. So what do we find? So essentially, those information comes from a form. So on the form, you will have information about the beneficiary himself. That's the you see the box in the central part of the diagram called the beneficiary 1.0, the beneficiary, and you see all the data elements that are there. So for example, here, the first element we have is the ID number. We have the full name, the gender, birth date, nationality, and so on. A lot of information detail that are describing the beneficiary, and that have to be um, uh, that have to be uh, taken into account in the database. Those are all the descriptive element of a beneficiary. And a beneficiary can be linked to a family. So you have a family representative, so on. They have like its own ID number. They have the place of residence. They have the procurator. It's an old person, so in this case they need a procurator. Um, and you have the information about the subsidy demand form, a specific occurrence. So that's the box number 18.0, subsidy demand. So when the beneficiary is presenting a demand, which is on paper, there's a number of that demand, unique number. You get there's this number, and then the date of the demand, the date of the demand, the subsidy type that is involved, where it has been receptioned, which office, which region, etc., which social worker was assigned to, etc. So for all the pieces of information you need to process to the the subsidies demand, everything is exploded into little pieces. And then you go on with the other dimension of the model. So here's about specifically about the subsidies, the type of subsidies that are involved, when they are, when can they be paid, uh, who's involved, and you see a particularity here. You have two white box. So those are information, those are data that are coming from other systems that we are linked to. And you see ID number everywhere. ID number enables you to links data with other data. So that's one of the foundation of database, identification number for data element. So that's, I will leave you take a deeper look from your side on those model. Now let's talk about software architecture model. So one of the layer, so that this, just to give you an idea what's under the hood, so to speak. So when you're doing systems, you need to describe the functions, the data, the process, but you also have an idea of the infrastructure. And the infrastructure, we have the software infrastructure and the hardware infrastructure. So now there's many ways of illustrating the software architecture, and so that's a way of speaking of software architecture. So we're using architecture models. Architecture models are not like very well defined. There's all sorts of models, and the representation that are used are more for the IT specialists to understand themselves between each other, and the type of representation that are using all varied a lot depending on the technology they're uh, using. So here's where it's an example what we call the layered architecture. So because when you're doing a system where you're in this at the software part, you still have a other layer, and for each layer they have specific way to um, illustrate those layers. So in the diagram here, so you have the presentation layer, business layer, persistent layers, database layers. Just getting quickly about that, talking quickly about that. So the presentation layer is the user interface presentation. So that's the layers that show you the information on your screen. So there's a specific layer of software, specific set of software that do that. It receives the information, the data from other parts, and the only function they have is to show it to you and to make you able to do interaction with the systems, like deleting, updating, etc. Then you have the business layer. This layer you don't see you don't see, it's hidden completely to you. But essentially it's the code. It's the code that's the programs that support the business rules that you have defined and within your functional model. Then you have another layer called the persistent layer. This is another um, layer that you don't see. It's completely internal. So this specific set of software that is essentially managing the the flow of data that's coming from the database into the processor. So this is specific. So in order for you to have information showed to you on your screen, we need to access the information somewhere in the database on a storage device like a disk or a SSD device, a solid state device, and it can go through the internet or not, but you need to have a temporary storage so we can show it to you on your interface. So that's what the persistence layer. Then you need to also to have the temporary storage to produce calculation, statistics, reports, things like that. So that's the use of the persistent layer. And then you have the database layer. And the database layer is like we have explained a little bit already. It's a system by itself, which is own functions is to manage data, all the data elements, all the occurrence of the data. So when we speak of software, so the IT specialists, they need another set of representation to understand themselves and to bridge what you want that you have described in your own model, which are the functional model, database, data model, uh, administrative process model. So I will let you read through those details that I've just explained earlier with the diagram. So here we have an example of a representation of software architecture, another type of software architecture that can be used. This is a high level. It's come from the open source Core MIS. Remember the Core MIS that have been implemented in Cameroon. And here it's a simplified way of showing the layer. So you have the database layer, front end layer, back end layer. So the front end layers is the layer of technology and software that enables you to see the information on your screens and to interact with it with your keyboards, essentially. The backend layer here essentially is showing all the processes that have been coded into programs to support the functionality of the system that you need to have. And the little blue cylinders represent the storage, the database layer. In this case, we see a relational database, which is the most common type of database used for build system. So other example, the OpenMS open source platform. So that's an example of their software architecture. So we see the type of product. Those are all open source product, by the way. So you have the front end, the back end, and the relational database that is used. So on the front end, you have like specific tools, open source tools that help the IT professional to build the interface, to show you information and to interact with the informations. The backend, again, so you have like a set of specific software. Here we see Django, GraphQL, Python. Python is a programming language. So they use those software to build what they call the backend. And then you have the relational database layer. Uh, so the main one that is used is PostgreSQL with the little elephant graphic. So this one of the most used open source database management system that is used. And you have other specific software, open source, that are used to manage data with that. So what we call software architecture, there's many types. And it's up to the software specialists to and IT developers to use what they want. Here's is the infrastructure model. So the idea of the infrastructure model is to have we have many types. So this is kind of a first level layer. And the idea is for you to communicate, it's for the IT people to communicate with the user, the system, and the social protection specialists that are at the base of the definition of the system. It's a way to communicate to them the technology that is in use. And the reason it's important to communicate that is because the technology will bring constraint. So based on those kind of illustration, it's easier to communicate for all sort of needs inside the process of the developing a system. So we can see where the security measures are. We can we can better understand how to do the deployment of the technology in the system, and so on. So infrastructure model. It's a little bit like the software modeling. So for infrastructure, there's no real ideal way. There's a lot of ways to build a model. There's some conventions. The idea is most of the time the IT specialists will use a set of conventions to do their model. So even though they're not using exactly the same way of illustrating their design, at least there's a minimal conventions. And some of the conventions are ruled by what we call the UML. UML is the Unified Modeling Language. That is kind of used by a lot of IT specialists. So here we have this example we've seen earlier. It comes from, in this case, it's an illustration of the Social Security Board infrastructure. So we can see they are using the mobile technology. We can see how the way when you do mobile, you're providing a level of complexity you don't see, but it's more complex. Even though when you look at your phone, seems very simple, but the technology behind is quite complex, especially for make sure that the information is not corrupted when you are communicating with your servers, with your main servers. So here we have quickly the central box represent the data center infrastructures. So there's a lot of servers, etc. We see a red brick wall that represent the firewall, but also the whole security environment. When you see a little white tube, it represents the communication link between the mobile service and the internet. We see communication happening with banks. We can see a little lock that represent encryption of data, and so on. So the idea is to provide an idea of well, we can say also like external system communicating with our main system at the data center. In this case, we have some information coming from the national registration system. Some information are exchanged. So you see the uh, infrastructure there involved.